Mathew, can you tell me a bit about what was going on this morning? Looked like you were down at this proposed boarding house site.
Yeah, the last council meeting was the first ever development application, or DA, to be considered by the new group of councillors. And it's a pretty big decision to make a development application, especially in this particular example. There were 8 objections or 8 objectors that we were aware of who weren't happy with the development and in its current form. And obviously there was a developer who was trying to develop some affordable housing. And we'd already talked at the council meeting about the need for more affordable housing and more housing in general. So one of the councillors moved a motion to defer it to this month's meeting. That was supported by council. It was a sensible decision because you've really got a lot to consider in a DA. And again, new council, first time ever considering it. So it was, let's take it slowly. Let's make sure we understand everything. As part of that process, we had an on-site meeting so that the councillors could walk around the site, could look at how this development might look in context to the rest of the developments around that particular site, and also so the actual people who live around there, the objectors or anyone that lived around there, could come and talk to us as councillors and give us their points of view and really pointing out various things that were there. So a very productive meeting, a good opportunity for councillors to learn more about that overall development process.
Okay, so can you tell me, first of all, what is the proposal? So it's a boarding house. Can you tell me a bit about that, please?
Certainly. So it's a boarding house with 18 rooms, so a single dwelling. So that would mean there would be 18 people potentially that could live at this particular boarding house. It's a little bit different to what you might think in a normal boarding house. It actually contains 2 structures because they wanted to keep the visual amenity of the streetscape the same. The front part of the boarding house is single story, and you've got a car park behind that, and then you've got a 2-story at the back of the development. So from the streetscape, it's quite difficult to see the 2-story component of the development. And again, the developer, in discussions with council staff, was aware that they needed to try to keep the street looking as normal as possible. At the moment, at the back part of that block, there's just some bushes and trees and weeds, so there's not really anything there at the moment. So it would really fill in that with a 2-story development. And as a boarding house, there are certain conditions that would be imposed. In this particular example, there would be a minimum 3-month stay. So it would probably be people who move to Dubbo, are trying to find somewhere to live. They might be looking to rent, they might be looking to buy, but they need some temporary accommodation. They've just got a job here, for example, and they need somewhere to live in the short term. Motels or Airbnb become a bit expensive, so a boarding house like this is somewhere they might live while they're finding somewhere. That's the sort of target market that the developers are after.
So what are the objections? Because I believe there were about 8, were there?
There were 8 objectors.
Objecting to it?
Yeah, there were 8.
Objectors, yeah. What were their issues?
There were a few issues that they had, and again, they put those in letters to councillors, but they've also expressed them verbally this morning during the meeting. So there were things that they were concerned about in terms of the number of people living there. Obviously, at the moment, there's not 18 people living on that block. So you increase the number of people that live in any area, that's going to increase the noise. So they were concerned about the noise. They're also concerned about the fact that most of that neighbourhood at the moment, they feel seems to have families growing up. They've been there long term. We talked to some residents that have been there for decades, talked to some people who grew up in that area. So they feel like it's a beautiful family area. People living in that area for, say, 3 months, for example, they feel would change the flavour or the nature of people living in that area. So they were concerned about the people that might be coming in and out of the neighbourhood. Certainly they were probably concerned a little bit as well about the atmosphere that might be created when you've got 18 people. Maybe they're younger people. They might tend to stay up a little bit later. They might drink a little bit and enjoy themselves a little bit, but that again creates some noise in the area. There's the issue of the 2-story building, but that didn't seem to be a major part of the issue. Anytime you put up a 2-story building, you have some issues around privacy, you have some issues around shadowing, but they didn't seem to be major issues. It was probably more about the noise and the people that were living there. And again, when I say the people, it's not as if they're concerned about the individuals there, but it was more the idea that you have 18 people living together. Sometimes that just generates a bit of a party atmosphere, which wasn't in keeping with the flavour of the rest of the neighbourhood in the belief of the objectors.
So, okay, now you've considered the pros and cons actually going on site. What's the next step?
So the next step will be that the next council meeting on the 24th of February will be where a decision will be made. The last council meeting in January, as I said, it was deferred from that council meeting. Council made a decision to defer that to February. when it goes to the February council meeting, the development that's there in front of us could be accepted in its current form. It could be rejected in its current form. And sometimes, and I haven't heard any ideas around this at this stage, but sometimes people will put some extra conditions on a DA. So I've seen before on council where a development comes to council and councillors say, well, I think this is okay, but I think we just need to impose one extra condition or change something a little bit just to make it a bit better development for Dubbo. As I said, I haven't heard any different ideas around that. So in my opinion, it will come to the February meeting of council. Some of those objectives will probably come along to the council meeting again, which is fantastic. I like to see the community engage with council decisions, and then council will either accept that proposal from the developer or reject the proposal.